We're blessed with two high-quality guests here. We've got Peter Tatchell, human rights campaigner, and Ben Harris-Quinney, chairman of the right-wing Bow Group think tank. So we're going to get both sides of this. They know the drill by now. We have 60 seconds each to make their case, and then we get stuck into a wider debate. People, it's time.
Ladies and gentlemen, let's get ready to rumble!
I'm going to throw over to Peter first, please. Peter Tatchell, household name, human rights campaigner as well in his spare time. Peter, what are your views on this? 60 seconds to make your case now. Should transgender athletes be allowed to compete at the Olympics?
A blanket ban on trans athletes is unreasonable and disproportionate. There are many trans people that have a physiology the same as non-trans women. They're not big, they're not huge, they're not strong, they're just like other women. So banning them would be totally out of order. Plus, lots of non-trans women have advantages. So some have fast twitch muscle fibers, which enables them to sprint faster than other women. Some have extra large hearts and lungs, which also give them an advantage. Others have long legs, which gives them an advantage in sprinting, in long jump, in triple jump, in high jump. And others will, of course, have advantages in swimming, like extra long arms and extra large hands, which gives them extra speed in swimming. So to single out trans people for a ban is wrong and unjustified. We have to acknowledge lots of athletes.
There you are, Peter. That's our deeply insensitive boxing bell. We'll be getting straight back into all of that. Good point. Ben Harris-Quinney's on the line now, chairman of the Bow Group, the right-wing think tank. Ben, same for you. 60 seconds starts now. Should transgender athletes be banned from competing at the Olympics?
Well, I think transgender or anyone else athletes shouldn't be barred from normal sport in any way. Sport is such an important part of life and a part of personal development. But when it comes to competition, official competition at the most senior levels, which the Olympics couldn't be at a more senior level, then there has to be a standardisation. There has to be a ban on drugs, and there has to be some sort of agreement as to where and why people are coming together to compete. And you can look at different characteristics of individuals, but ultimately, on a general basis, men and women are very different, and they're very different in sport. You can look at the science that shows that the average male is a third stronger than the average female. You've also got things like testosterone. Now, steroids don't make that much difference. We wouldn't allow steroids in sport. So I think there has to be a balance here.
Cheers, Ben. There you are. Again, deeply insensitive boxing bell time. Peter, I'm just going to return back to you now, and some great points on both sides here, by the way. Peter, I will just ask you, where's the feminism in all of this, right? You know, you've got women here, born women, who have trained their entire life to get to the Olympics, and now all of a sudden, Laurel rocks up, born a man, and takes their place. Where's the feminism here, Peter?
Well, of course, there has to be fairness in sport, but sport is never a level playing field. Never ever. There's no sport where there's a level playing field. In all sports, some competitors have various advantages, which I mentioned in my opening remarks. And these are very serious, substantive advantages, which give those people great leverage over other competitors. So I would
argue, sorry, Peter, I would argue that being born a man is quite a massive advantage if you want to compete in weightlifting against other women.
Well, in some sports, there may be individual cases, but that's what I'm saying. There has to be, at the very least, individual assessment. A blanket ban, which many people are arguing for, is unjustified. There are lots of trans competitors who are physiologically no different than other non-trans women. They have a similar muscle strength, a similar levels of other physical attributes. There's no indication that they have any physiological advantage. They should not be banned, quite clearly. It would be wrong. And I think, again, it's about why are trans people being singled out for this special penalty? Look at the case of Casta Semenya. Now, she is not trans, she is intersex.
But that's my point, though, isn't it? In a way, Pete, that's my point. Which is, I thought it was disgraceful what happened to Caster Semenya. I must say. I mean, I thought she's a tremendous athlete. Who's at the top of her game. Who was treated abysmally, right? But actually, Laurel can just turn up and take part in the super heavyweight weightlifting. 43-year-old Laurel, born a bloke, who's, spoiler alert, massive, right? Who can now take part in this. I just find that a bit rum. Ben, I suppose the other side of this is Laurel now has decided that she's a woman, and so we just have to live and let live, don't we?
No, not at this level of competitive sport. I mean, what Peter is essentially saying is that some athletes have advantages over others. Well, yes, of course they do, and that's why they win. But are we saying that if someone has bigger hands, the other athlete should be allowed to take a few steroids or to be given a drugs boost? There has to be a universally agreed standard. We've got to remember as well that the Olympics is for the world. It's not just for a small group of wokesters in London. And when you engage with the world, you have to find a level of agreement that all nations are going to sign up to. And I think it's an incredible achievement that has been achieved with the Olympics. We've got a situation where almost all of the nations of the world can agree that they're coming together to compete on this basis. When you start throwing the trans agenda in or various other agendas in that are only really subscribed to by a very small percentage of a very small percentage of countries, this is not something that the United Kingdom would agree on. In fact, most people in the UK are against these sorts of ideas. When you throw that open to the world and countries like Saudi Arabia and Russia and all these other nations, you're not going to get the Olympics off the ground. You're going to end up cancelling the Olympics. So I think we need to recognise the value of the Olympics, the fact that people all over the world value being able to watch the Olympics, take part in the Olympics, be part of the Olympics as a nation, and not let these sort of very fringe, very extreme ideas of a very, very small percentage of society upturn all that. I'm not saying, to be clear, I'm not saying that people should be excluded from sport. What I'm saying is there has to be a basis of agreement that all parties can come together to compete, and we currently have that.
Well, look, there's interesting points that Ben. Peter, I'm just going to throw it over to you. Can we not just have the trans games? Is that not a thing we could do?
Well, to take Ben's point, I find it quite offensive that he refers to the trans agenda. We're talking about the human rights, dignity and respect of trans people and the right of them to be included in all aspects of society. This is not an agenda. This is not some woke campaign. This is about respecting a section of society who suffer disproportionate discrimination, prejudice, and violence. The levels of violence and hatred and discrimination suffered by trans people are way off the scale, far greater than almost any other group of people anywhere in the world. And I think for society to pile on further oppression on that group is out of order. I would like to ask Ben what would be wrong. I don't support any ban, but let's say we want to find a compromise. Why not, instead of having a blanket ban, why not having individual assessment?
All the trans games, Peter. Well, why can't we have the trans games? They have their own.
Well, why don't we have the white games? Why don't we have the Christian games?
Is it? It's not the same thing, that, Peter. Look, I've got to put this to you. If I had a daughter, right, and she played for Manchester United ladies, or she was on trial for Manchester United ladies, and she's dedicated every minute of her waking life to trying to be the best footballer that she could possibly be, and then we get to the trials, and James turns up. Right, and James is 6'4", and he plays up front, and he's banging goals in for fun. And James gets picked for Manchester United's ladies over my daughter. I would be fuming, Peter.
Well, you might be. You might well be fuming. But have you seen some of the great rugby players in this country? Vicky Fleetwood, Portia Woodman, Ali Boatman. They are non-trans women, but they are big, they are strong, they've got huge muscle mass. A lot of people would say they have a big advantage over other players. I wouldn't say that. I say they have a right to compete, and I don't think that a trans person of a similar strength and musculature to those three women who are great players, and I salute them. I don't think a trans person with similar musculature or strength should be excluded. It's as simple as that.
Okay, Peter, great points. Ben, I'm going to throw it over to you. There's no trans agenda. There's no such thing as a trans agenda.
Well, there very clearly is, and of course, Peter is involved in many of the organisations that push these sorts of agendas, and indeed, you're seeing at the moment a split in the what was previously called the LGBT community, with many that are simply LGB that want to disassociate themselves with the T part because they feel that it is bringing the whole movement into disrepute. So look, this is we know that this issue is a live political issue. That's why we're discussing it. Different people in it have an agenda. There are certainly, although I'm often castigated as someone who is an extremist on the other end of the spectrum to Peter, there are people that are far more extreme than I. And I think if you look at the polling and what people think about these issues generally just in Britain, they're pretty much in line with my views, which are not views that want to see trans people excluded from sport, but acknowledge the necessity in sport for a general set of rules and a general agreement that we can all come together on. It's a completely unworkable situation to say we've got to look at each individual athlete individually and spend time working out their muscle mass and their hand size and their leg size and their height and all of that sort of thing. And then decide we're going to level the playing field with athletes that don't quite come up to that standard. It's a totally unworkable situation. It's an unworkable situation not only in sporting terms, but also in terms of international relations. And I come back to the point that we've got a situation with the Olympics, whilst a lot of countries abuse and push drugs on their athletes over the years. We've come to a collective international agreement where the world can come together and compete in a sporting event, which is not only great for sport, but is also great for international relations and great for peace. And the same applies to the World Cup and all sorts of other competitions that go on. And I think it's absolutely wrong to upset that. You can come on to the debate.
I take your points, guys. I'm really sorry. We've got to move on. I think. Look, I really enjoyed that, and it was great to have both of you on, and both of you put your case across so eloquently and so passionately as well. Peter, thank you. Peter Tatchell, human rights campaigner, and Ben Harris-Quinney, chairman of the Group think tank.